You feel a deep gnawing frustration watching others with lesser creations rise while your masterpieces remain unseen. There's a persistent whisper that something is fundamentally misaligned with how true value moves in this world. This isn't a minor irritation. It is a resonant chord struck deep within the sovereign self, a knowing that your mastery, painstakingly cultivated, is being bypassed by a mechanism you do not yet discern. You are a silent architect of profound beauty, yet you witness the rapid ascent of what feels like trivial echoes. It's not a lack of depth, not an absence of vision, but a confounding void where recognition should reside. A testament to something fundamentally misaligned with the very architecture of impact in this accelerated epoch. This dissonance echoes a deeply programmed illusion, the persistent whisper that true merit, pure creation, must, by some universal law, inevitably rise. We were taught to believe in a natural order where the most potent ideas, the most meticulously crafted insights, would somehow simply ascend through sheer inherent quality. This is the operating system many still run, inherited from a timeline that no longer holds sway. You pour your essence into the genesis, believing its intrinsic value will serve as its own beacon, only to discover the beacon is unlit, and the landscape around it has shifted, making that faith a silent prayer to an unresponsive sky. The world you inhabit now operates on a different set of unseen protocols, and your work, however profound, is being processed by outdated assumptions. The profound headfake is believing the bottleneck lies within the genesis itself, that if only your creation were ye more refined, more brilliant, you more uniquely singular, its visibility would simply materialize. This is the lie. The true constriction, the actual impediment to your sovereign impact, is no longer the act of creating your profound insight. It is, instead, the glaring absence of a sovereign channel for its inherent propagation. You have built a magnificent spring, pure and potent, but neglected to architect the rivers that would carry its waters to the parched lands that desperately await its flow. The mastery of output is complete, yet the design of its transmission remains an uncharted territory, and it is in this void that your highest frequency is contained. Consider the inverted ratio, the silent agreement you unwittingly hold. Your internal operating system, optimized for an older reality, defaults to an 80% creation, 20% distribution protocol. You spend the vast majority of your sovereign energy in the exquisite act of genesis, in the deep dive of refinement, leaving only a fractional, often reluctant, allocation for its outward broadcast. This isn't merely an inefficient strategy. It is an active, self-chosen broadcast of invisibility. Your very allocation of energy dictates the universe's response. The universe, in its perfect mirroring, is simply reflecting the reality you have architected through your priorities, ensuring that the profound insights you bring forth remain largely contained within your own carefully constructed, yet ultimately isolated, sphere. And here is where the old programming truly asserts its insidious hold. Faced with this gnawing frustration, the mind's automatic reflex is not to interrogate the channel, but to double down on the source. I must create God more. I must make it a better. This impulse to refine, to deepen, to produce with even greater intensity becomes an elegant, self-perpetuating diversion. It funnels your potent, finite energy back into the very phase that is no longer the bottleneck, actively drawing you away from the true leverage point. You are a sovereign crafting an exquisite vessel, polishing its hull to a brilliant sheen, all while neglecting to build the engine, the rudder, or indeed, the very sea lanes it must traverse. This redirection is the subtle, profound head fake of an outdated internal architecture. ensuring your perpetual engagement in the magnificent, yet ultimately untransmitted act of creation. The sovereign architect understands that the creative act, in its true and complete form, does not conclude with the genesis of the idea or the crafting of the output. It extends, without interruption, into the design of its distribution. This is not a secondary marketing task, relegated to an afterthought or outsourced to lesser hands. It is the primary, non-negotiable phase of the creative act itself, the deliberate, intentional architecture of the pathways your frequency will propagate. To separate creation from its transmission is to render it inherently incomplete, a half-formed thought in the universal mind. Your highest work demands a congruent, intentional distribution architecture, woven into its very fabric from the initial spark, a deliberate act of designing the inevitable arrival of your resonance. In this accelerating epoch, time itself is compressing, demanding an immediate upgrade to the internal operating system that defaults to pure output. The illusion that more or better creation will somehow magically solve the problem of visibility is the final, most cunning trap. You are not being asked to simply aggregate more distribution, to merely tack on a new list of tasks to your already overflowing plate. That is another head fake. The true imperative is an identity shift, to embody the architect who sees the channel as an extension of the creative impulse, not an obligation to be fulfilled. Your unexamined operating system is actively generating your invisibility right now, and the timeline demands not just action, but a fundamental re-architecture of your sovereign self to command the resonance you already hold. This shift reclaims your time sovereignty from the endless, exhausting cycle of production for its own sake. When you integrate distribution as the inevitable final phase of creation, you liberate yourself from the incessant demand to generate new output simply to stay relevant. Instead, you activate a more profound leverage, the intelligent, deliberate amplification of what has already been brought forth with absolute integrity. It is an understanding that the elegance of your channel amplifies the potency of your message rather than detracting from it. This is not about marketing in the traditional sense, but about designing conduits of pure, unadulterated frequency, ensuring that every facet of your sovereign expression finds its destined and undeniable audience. The sovereign architect understands that a creation truly exists only when its resonance has been released and commanded into the collective field. Your masterpiece, however profound, is a whisper if confined to your internal realm. Distribution, then, is not merely a strategy. It is the final, integral phase of creation, granting you true command over your impact. It is the act of inscribing your sovereign truth into the very fabric of reality, ensuring its inevitable arrival. Are you ready to step into this expanded identity, to become the architect not just of your vision, but of its undeniable resonance across all timelines? Growl phase of the creative act itself. For what is a genesis that remains unmirrored in the collective consciousness? It is merely a potential, a frequency signature held in abeyance. The true sovereign understands that creation is not a singular event but a circuit, one that begins with the impulse and completes only with the deliberate, designed propagation of its essence. To cease at the point of origination is to intentionally sever the energetic return, condemning your highest work to an echo in an empty hall. This is not a secondary consideration, a marketing task to be delegated or grudgingly approached. This is the very act of bringing into being at its most profound, its most complete. This is precisely where the default protocol of 80% creation and merely 20% distribution becomes an active broadcast of self-selected invisibility. It is not merely an inefficient allocation of energy. It is a declaration to the universe that your deepest insights, your most potent activations, are not yet ready for their full embodiment. The unspoken assumption The embedded program is that pure quality will inevitably cut through the noise, that resonance will find its way by some cosmic osmosis. But that assumption is a relic, a whisper from a timeline that has long collapsed. In this accelerated epoch, quality without commanded distribution is a frequency intentionally muted, a signal held within the emitter, never reaching the receiver it was designed to awaken. The mind's reflex, when confronted with this gnawing invisibility, is to double down, to create egg more, to create I more. This is the insidious head fake of outdated programming, diverting precious energy from the true leverage point. It is a persistent illusion that compels the architect to polish the blueprint endlessly, while neglecting the very scaffolding required for its manifestation. This perpetuates the cycle: more output, less commanded arrival. The true leverage, the point of sovereign command, is not found in the iterative refinement of the internal signal, but in the deliberate, intelligent design of the channels through which that signal must propagate. To ignore this is to funnel your vital force into an ever-deepening void of unacknowledged brilliance. The sovereign alternative, then, is to rewire the internal operating system from an output-centric model to a resonance command model. Distribution is not a task you add on. It is a foundational pillar of the creative act itself. It is the conscious sculpting of pathways, the premeditated design of how your frequency will interact with, penetrate, and reorganize the collective field. This demands an identity shift from creator to I-system architect of resonance. You are not just birthing an idea. You are engineering its inevitable arrival, its inescapable imprint. This shift is an act of supreme self-authority, reclaiming the power that was once unconsciously outsourced to the whims of an indifferent algorithm or the passive hope of being discovered. What this means for your lived reality is an immediate recalibration of your energetic output. You cease the exhausting cycle of endless production, the frantic chase for more, and begin to operate with surgical precision. This reclaims your time sovereignty not by doing less, but by doing what matters with absolute congruence. Your highest work begins to move with a profound, almost magnetic inevitability. No longer will you witness lesser frequencies command greater attention, for you will have architected your own field of influence. The frustration dissolves, replaced by the quiet certainty of a master builder watching their vision solidify into tangible form. You don't hope for impact, you design it. In this accelerating epoch, an unexamined operating system, the creation-first mindset ensures your highest work remains a whisper, a latent code never fully activated. Time itself demands an immediate upgrade. Time itself demands an immediate upgrade. There is no longer the luxury of deferring the design of your propagation. To hesitate is to actively choose the timeline of your own invisibility, to consciously withhold your most potent contributions from the very reality they are meant to shape. The imperative is clear. Architect your resonance. Command its inevitable arrival. Understand that the universe is not waiting to discover your genius. It is waiting for you to broadcast your genius with absolute authority into the very fabric of its becoming. The true sovereign architect does not merely birth an idea. They design its journey. They engineer its reception. They command its integration into the collective consciousness. This is not a choice you make once and forget. It is a continuous act of sovereign stewardship. You are the architect of the world you select, and that world begins with the conscious, deliberate design of how your highest frequency is not merely created, but eternally, powerfully, and inevitably distributed. The key is in your hands. The framework is revealed. The reselection is now. Activate your architecture and watch your reality coalesce around the undeniable signature of your commanded presence.